Hi, everyone. This is a little talk on the collage portrait project that you are about to do or are in the process of beginning. And I want to talk about the history of collage portraiture in art, but mostly 20th century art and 21st century art. So, what is a portrait? A portrait is a painting, photograph, sculpture, or other artistic representation of a person in which the face and its expression is predominant. The intent is to display the likeness, personality, and even the mood of the person. Now, that's a regular portrait or a conventional portrait, but we're doing collage portraits. So we are going to use other material also to represent the person and put it into the same painting. So what other material could you use? You could use some text, you could use other images representing ephemera or keepsakes of the person. You could use the background of the person and images from that background, such as their um, parents, siblings, the places that they grew up and frequented as a child and as a developing, person, meaning teenager, early 20s if the artist is older. But this must be a portrait of an artist who is fairly well known, and that doesn't usually happen until a little bit later in the artist's life. So usually they've lived um, quite interesting lives. And your job is to find out. If you cannot research the person or don't find material when you're researching the person, that's not a good artist to choose for this project. So the history of collage portraiture. Well, if you take this as a likeness that you're going to paint of the person, and then you're going to put in the background or the environment, we'll start with the Mona Lisa. The background, the landscape that Leonardo chose to put behind the portrait of the woman, and I think it was a real woman who lived in Florence. I think her name was Lisa Grandi, something like that, Grandini. And she had children, she had a husband. This was the painting of her environment behind her. So she probably wasn't sitting in front of that landscape when he had her sit as he did sketches for this portrait, but he chose to put that landscape behind her. So that's what you're going to do is choose things and landscapes that represent the person as well as their likeness. This was another piece by an artist named Van Eyck, and it was the portrait of the nuptials of the couple Amalfini. And you can see in this portrait, actually, there's a lot of symbols we learned in our art history class. You can look into it, but yeah. So there's even I think, a little likeness of the artist in the mirror, or in the, yeah, I think it's a mirror in the background. And other symbols are the little dog, which I think represents, or something in the portrait represents fidelity, the sandals. So you can research this and find out about the couple. So what we're doing is showing things in the portraits that we do that represent the person as well as their likeness, to repeat what I said before. This is a painting by Max Ernst, and it is a woman, Old Man in Flower. Max Ernst was a part of the Surrealist movement in the early 20th century in Europe. And he also believed that dreams and thought processes were as important as the exterior appearance of things. So he was interested in the human psychology and mind. So in this, you notice the line drawing of the arms The more realistic rendering of the headgear, another person, which seems to have maybe an animal head of some sort, and then the figure through which we can actually see a landscape. So part of it is transparent. So there are many ways of depicting the landscape, the figure, and we've studied different ways of drawing and painting in this class, and I want you to use as many as you can in this painting. These are all Max Ernst paintings. So here he represents a personage in the shape of a castle. So it doesn't, you could even include parts of the body that have become other structures or even animals. Meet Rose C'est-La-Vie. This was Marcel Duchamp's female alter ego. So Marcel Duchamp as a woman. Again, Marcel Duchamp was part of the Surrealist movement, but he ended up being more of a conceptualist when he came to this country. You've all heard the name. Very interesting and influential artist of the 20th century. So he photographed, or he had someone else photograph himself as a woman. A photograph by Francis Picabia, a painting by Francis Picabia. And this is of a woman. Notice the large eyes, distorted, the jewelry, the hand, which is elongated. So he exaggerated certain features because he thought that was important. Hannah Höch followed in that tradition. She was also a surrealist, but a philosopher as well, and a writer. There's an interesting show of hers right now in a very important gallery. I'm not sure, I think it was in New York. It is in New York, and also on the web. That is a show of her philosophical writing. So I'm not sure how they did that. But one of my students last semester picked her as his artist, and it was really interesting to see the final collage portrait. So she also included in her, she really did collage portrait. That's what her media was. And she included photography, drawing, painting, and writing. Frida Kahlo, this is a self-portrait. I think it was called Self-Portrait with Necklace of Thorns. And notice the animals on her shoulders, the native plant behind her, and the thorns around her neck, which represented her struggles with pain and because of her health problems throughout her life. She kept animals. She was very attached to her animals. There's a cat on her left shoulder and a monkey on her right. This is an artist who used a lot of collage, meaning he pieced together elements, photography, geometric elements, which you could do in Adobe Illustrator, painting in his work. This is Romir Bearden. I have several Romir Beardens. He was an African-American artist also, and so he often put in some pictures of his African ancestry. And these were, this is a painting by him, a serigraph actually, and included his southern ancestry in this country. Another collage, noticed all the elements, torn paper from magazines, the eye above, hands, by Romir Bearden. This collage was done by an artist named Rauschenberg, and it's a self-portrait. He was a very famous mid-century American artist who really expanded the definition of collage. His style was kind of a loose scribbling and mark making. He also was able to do conventional portraiture, as is evidenced in this. But this might have been taken directly from a photograph, or it might be a photograph printed on the emulsion, put onto the canvas. I'm not sure. But notice the collage element. In other words, the putting together of disparate elements, elements that wouldn't ordinarily be considered compatible in this piece. An artist who really took the boundary of collage, putting together of elements, to a new level was an artist named Nancy Spiro. She's also deceased. And her drawings are very representative of her struggle as a woman, and her also coming to this country through the Second World War, I think. So I'll show a few of her pieces. They were political and protest, often involved protest against a repressive political system. I saw this painting at some point online or in a magazine, and an artist named Catherine Johnson. I think she might be either from New Zealand or Australia. And what I like here is that she represents herself as part of the earth. It almost looks like she's rising out of the earth, and a pose representative of perhaps her feelings, her hands put together as if they're praying, but red nails, and an animal, which I didn't know before a student told me that it's a kiwi, or an animal that lives in Australia. This is an artist named Toyin Odutola, and he shows in New York. Notice the landscape and the lines that he used, as well as a very representative chiaroscuro kind of rendering of his face. Another beautiful collage on Time magazine this last year, an African-American woman holding a disappeared child. I think it was in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement. Some artists that I know in LA do collage painting, not necessarily portraiture, but painting. They include a lot of animals, so maybe those are portraits of animals, but they collage elements from their lives, elements from the landscape, and elements of nature. So this is kind of a portrait of a dog or a coyote done by a friend of mine, where she includes kind of a graffiti and some astrological material, signs and symbols. A self-portrait that I saw on the internet of an artist named Young Jake. And I like this because it includes cartoon figures on his nose. Obviously, people don't have cartoon figures and little symbols jumping around on their face. But I thought that going this far was totally appropriate. He also includes some abstract elements in the paint. So appropriate because this is not about reality. This is about his self and how what's important to him in his being right now. Finally, a student of mine showed me this, and he told me it was kind of a painting of his cat, but I thought it was great in terms of the elements that he included, the paper, the newspaper, and on top he did a line drawing, but kind of a painterly line drawing of his cat. And that's it. So I hope this gives you some ideas of how I want you to collage things together. This was rather a conservative group of works, meaning that it's not too wild, but you could see that the main focus of each painting was a person or a personage or an animal that had meaning to the artist. And then other things in that person's life that were meaningful. So that's what I expect you to do. Thank you.